Alright guys, so today I'm going to teach you how to learn two language at the fastest rate. So what's the fastest way you learn two languages, right? At the same time? Well, here's the short answer. There is none. Alright? It's better to learn one language at a time than to learn two languages at the same time. Okay? Like, guys, and here's why. Because when it comes to languages, it's not just about the amount of time, needed to learn a certain language. It's also like the condensed period of time that you learn the language. So what do I mean? Well, the more you can condense your time learning a language, the faster you learn it, right? So let's say, for example, it takes 2,000 hours of immersion to get fluent in French. It's better to spend 8 hours every day, right, learning French until you reach 2,000 hours versus spending 2 hours of French a day, right? In reaching 2,000 hours. So if I do the math, so 2,000 hours, so if you did 2,000 hours of French, right, and you immersed yourself for 8 hours a day, that would be roughly 250 days. So that would equate to roughly 8 months. So it will take you 8 months to reach this number if you immersed 8 hours a day. But let's say, for example, someone were to take 2 hours a day. They were, slow, they wanted to spend 2 hours of French and they wanted to spend 2 hours of Spanish, right? For example, right? This person, it would take them almost 3 years or 2.7 years, right? So 2 years and a half to reach this number of 8,000 hours. Now, I guarantee you, the person that learned, that spent 2,000 hours and spent only 8 months immersing 8 hours a day, they would reach fluency faster and better, and they would have a higher level of the language than the person who spent only 2 hours a day. Now, here's why. It's because when you can spend that amount of time every single day, right, immersing yourself, there's certain grammar patterns and vocabulary that repeat. So if you're to learn a word, right, and if you've been immersing in language 8 hours every day, you might come across that word again the next day, right? Versus this person, they might not come across this grammar pattern or word again in a couple weeks or months, right? Because their immersion is not condensed. They're not going to be able to see the repeated words and grammar patterns that come up in language, which is very important, guys. The reason why certain words are easier than others is just because of the frequency, right? When you think of a hard word, it's only hard because it's a rare word that's not commonly used. It's not actually a rare word. If you actually look at the definition of the word is probably not hard. What makes a word hard in a language is the frequency at which you see that word in the language, right? So, if you're to immerse yourself for 8 hours a day in a language, right, you'll be able to come across those rare words a lot more frequently, which will make the perception of that word seem like that word is easy to learn because you've been seeing this word so many times. Whereas the person that was only immersing for 2 hours a day and taking his time, he may not see this rare word in a couple months. You know what I mean? He's taking his, sweet time. So he's gonna forget the grammar pattern. He's gonna forget the word before it starts to repeat again. So when it comes to learning languages, guys, that's why it's important to reach at least basic fluency, right? Before you start to learn another language, all right? Because here's why. So I'm an example, right? So I've reached pretty much basic fluency in both French and Japanese. So with me, I could technically learn, French and Japanese at the same time because I'm already technically fluent in it. What I mean? Well, I've already developed a vocabulary high enough to be able to pretty much understand at least with French, it's pretty much 99% of understand what people say in daily conversation. And when it comes to maybe harder podcasts, maybe 95%, 94%. So that's the level I'm at with French. And with Japanese, I can pretty much understand 100% with daily conversation in Japanese, and with hard anime, and I can read books I have Japanese books in the back. I can understand with those books, I understand literally 99%. There's only a couple phrases or even words where I slightly don't know the exact meaning, but I still know the rough meaning. So that's the level I'm at with Japanese, right? And with something like this, I'm able to learn these languages at the same time because I've already developed a basic fluency. You know, I'm already like, it's like I'm already fluent in the language, right? So like if I wanted to increase my vocabulary in Japanese, I could do that at the same time as I'm learning French because both are at an extremely high level, right? So maybe they kind of just do this. But if you're trying to learn French and Japanese from scratch, you know nothing, then that's a no-go, right? Because here's the thing, once you reach basic fluency in a language, it becomes very hard to forget that language. So what this means is like, if you get fluent in French, like, you know, and you take a break off from French and you start learning Japanese, you won't actually forget French because your brain has already developed a very solid system for French in your brain. So like for me, like, you know, I have a very strong system, you know, language learning advice system in my brain for French and Japanese. So I could take a break from, you know, exposing myself to French for like, you know, maybe like 3-4 years, and I'll come back and I'll still be fluent, right? Or maybe I'll forget some words, yeah, maybe, but I'll be able to come back to the French language and like act like nothing happened. Because my subconscious brain has already decoded and already has a program, a language learning, like a French, like literal like device in my brain that decodes the French language for me, right? And it's gonna stay there like for a very long period of time. But let's say you were to learn French from scratch and you didn't reach at this level, like you didn't arrive at the level of fluency that I'm talking about, then you forget French like very fast, right? So that's the thing, like languages, you forget the languages easily if you're not fluent, but once you're fluent, it becomes hard to forget. So you just have to make sure that you get to this point of fluency, like basic fluency. I'm not talking native level, I'm talking just like basic fluency where you can understand like 99 what people say in daily conversation. I'm talking that type of fluency. Once you arrive here, bro, it's gonna be very hard to forget the language. But if you're before that line, it's gonna be very easy for you to forget, right? So that's the thing with languages, you know. So for me, like I don't have to try to maintain my Japanese and French because it's like, you know, it's like really easy to do so, you know, because I'm already fluent in both languages. So yeah, guys, that's the only time I'd recommend you do two languages at the same time. But even so, guys, I still do cycles of Japanese and French. So for example, I was in France for like a month this summer. I only consumed French content when I was over there. I only immersed myself in French. I didn't do any Japanese, like zero Japanese when I was in France, because I was completely immersing myself in only consuming French content in French, right? So and that's because I wanted to accelerate my French, like when I was in France, right? And that's what happened, you know. So even when it comes to like fluent languages, like I would still like do cycles, right? Like you know, even for me, like if I wanted to really like improve my Japanese right now, like I would do like you know, maybe 3 months, 4 months monk mode, like Japanese, boom, go hard. I'll like be like reading, like for me to improve my Japanese, I'll probably be like have to like I'm gonna have to read like tons of books like that, right? And just like spend like 6 hours a day reading, right? That's how I would improve my Japanese, because like my Japanese, like I reached a level of vocabulary higher than most natives. So like my vocabulary is higher in Japanese than my mom, and my mom's a native speaker of Japanese. So I've already surpassed like vocabulary for my mom, who was, by the way, like went to the best high school in Kobe, in her region. So someone like her, you know, she hasn't been to university. She went to university here, but from a mom, right, who went to the highest level high school, right? If I have a higher vocabulary than someone like that, then that's like tells you the extent of my Japanese, right? So in terms of my vocabulary, it's like super high, right? So for me, like to improve my Japanese, I have to just read a bunch of books and watch like a bunch of hard anime, right? Watch anime that's like obscure, and like watch anime that is more seinen and more like adult driven, so that I can like, you know, acquire those like harder words and harder expressions, right? But so like, you know, but I would still go like very hard for just Japanese for like a couple months. And then if I want to improve my French, then I'll go hard for French for a couple months. So like I wouldn't do two at the same time. Like I wouldn't be like, you know, like maybe like spending like 2 hours a day studying French and then spend 2 hours a day. Like, I mean, I wouldn't do something like I'll spend like 2 hours French in the morning and then do 2 hours Japanese in the evening. Like I would not do something like that. Like don't do something like that. Like that's just weird. If it ends up working like that because you're like multilingual and you like have to talk to people in different languages, then like that's fine. But like when it comes to active study, I wouldn't active study French and Japanese at the same time, right? Even if you're fluent. So like even if you were actually fluent, guys, like I still would recommend that like, you know, you immerse in one language at a time. Like even if you wanted to improve your English, like if you wanted to improve your English, like, you know, the way I would do is like I would just like read a bunch of books, you know, and I'll just focus on, you know, reading a bunch of books and, you know, basically anking new cards that come by. Just memorize words that you don't know, right? That come by in your book, right? In the books that you read. That's how I would improve my English, or at least my English competence, right? Intuition. So, you know, and I would just focus on English. I wouldn't focus on French. I wouldn't do any Japanese. I would just only focus on English if I wanted to improve that. So it's faster and better to just learn one language at a time, you know, even if you're fluent already. Especially if you're not fluent. Especially if you're not fluent, guys, you have to learn like one at a time. Especially if you're not fluent in these languages. If you're trying to learn like, I want to learn like French and Chinese, it's like, dude, bro, don't even try, dude. Don't even try to do this at the same time. Don't even try. Okay? Do one at a time, right? And once you get fluent in one, then you can go to the other. Because like I said, once you get past the fluency line, it becomes hard to forget. You can take a year or two off the language, you won't forget it. But you have to arrive at the fluency mark. So make sure that if you, like, let's say your goal was to learn like 5 languages in the span of like 5 years. Just learn each language, like tackle one at a time and reach fluency first before you go to the next one. This is the best method. And once you like fluent in all of them, then if you want to improve one or the other, then you focus on that for a period of time. Like for me, like right now I'm focusing on Japanese. That's why I have these Japanese books in the back. And, you know, and that's because like, you know, I just got back from France, right? And, you know, my French was like pretty fluent after that. And I still have to work on my French, but like for me, like right now I'm prioritizing a little bit more Japanese just because I'm like super close to like mastering Japanese, like reaching like college level Japanese. Like I'm really close, but I just have to like spend a little bit more time before I reach that, before like I reach like college level Japanese. And then after that, then I'll go back to French, right? But I'm only focusing on Japanese right now, right? So yeah, guys, this is like how you would do it. So there is no such thing as learning 2 languages at the same time. Like it's better to just, you know, learn one at a time.